Hey, what's going on, guys? So today we're talking about a top 64 YCS Utrecht. Utrecht, I'm sorry, to the European players. I don't know how to say that city. But we're talking about the breakdown for the YCS. A little bit of a surprise, but not like that much. Um, yeah. So if we're taking a look down here at the bottom, the least represented deck in the top 64. So like the smallest fish in the big pond was Mathmech. And I will say this, in my top 10 best decks of the upcoming format, every deck on this list, other than like the others, made the list. Like Exosister did, Sprite, Flow on Reese, Mathmech. So it was a pretty solid top 10 list. With the exclusion of one, I would honestly switch two decks completely around. I had Sky Striker all the way at number 2, which obviously was a mistake, but there was a reason for that, and I'll explain that in a second. Floanderies was the next most represented deck with 5th. Pure Sprite, I don't know what that is, what that looks like. Maybe it's like Adventure Sprite, the Nimble package. I'm not sure. That got 6th of the top 64. There was a good amount of other, which is always nice to see. 17 other decks. Tier limits only got to 8, and none of them got in the top 4. D-Shifter's a card, and if you notice too, um, a lot of the decks don't really get hurt. Like Sprite, to an extent, does get hurt by D-Shifter, but not nearly as much as Tier Elements, right? So if I'm the Sprite player and I'm siding in a card, I might just side in D-Shifter, go, hey, you don't get to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And I don't get to play Yu-Gi-Oh! As well, but I can still play, right? Because Floanderies also has that. Exosister also has that. They can run D-Shifter and they'll be fine. Um, then we do see 5 evil twin sprites, um, which is interesting. Evil twins, that seems to be the best way to run sprite. Even though I know you're like, oh, what do you mean the runic sprite deck? That's the most represented deck, right? But we're gonna take a look at some lists in a second here. When you look at the evil twin sprite list, right? Because that's actually available. Lithium 2300 actually posted that. Um, you'll see a really big sprite package and like a smaller evil twin package to go along with it. When we take a look at the runic sprite deck, because runic sprite actually took first place, I mean obviously it faced itself in the finals, which is always good. That's always a good representation. Look at this: 4 sprite decks in the top 4 and 2 runic sprite decks in the top 2. That's always a showcasing of a healthy game state right there. Um, and anyway, when we take a look at the runic sprite deck, you'll see a lot of runic cards, and not as many sprite cards, right? What's cool about Sprite? Sprite is kind of like a like Tri Brigade, where it is a good package as well as a good deck by itself. It's almost kind of like replace Tri Brigade in the meta in that way. That has a lot to do with the fact that there's not a lot of like beasts and wing beasts and those type of decks that are really good. And that's the thing. Like the main reason why I'm talking about like Evil Twin Sprite is the best way to run Sprite, and Runic Sprite is the best way to run Runic. The main reason I'm talking about it like in that way is just simply due to the fact that when the ban list comes, which we're not going to get a ban list at least till the end of the year, if not January, usually probably like February, I would assume is when we're going to get the next ban list, which isn't that far away, but it's definitely far enough away. Looking at this top 64, seeing almost half of the top 64 being Runic Sprite, half of the top 8 being Runic Sprite, 75% of the top 4 being Runic Sprite, and of course, Runic Sprite facing itself in the final. Um, Kind of annoying, but nonetheless. By the way, I don't know if I said this yet. This article was posted by Jebus Mkanza. I don't know if I said that right on the Yu-Gi-Oh Reddit. Um, and its source was the Twitch Yu-Gi-Oh card in the Europe. That was the source for that. So that's the breakdown. But like I said, the main reason why I think I was wrong about what the best deck was going to be, I didn't think Tier Elements 1 was going to get hurt. I mean, it's the most counter deck. I think it's one of those situations again where we kind of saw that with Sword Soul. We kind of saw that with I'm trying to think of the best deck before Sword Soul. Like Tri Brigade was kind of like that, but not really. But anyway, it's the most countered deck, right? Sprite, maybe not people were worried about Sprite going into this YCS, so they weren't really worried about, maybe they weren't running the Mischiefs or the Gnomes or the Stygian Dirges, right? And then all of a sudden, boom. But I think there was another reason why the Runic Sprite did super well, and the reason for that, when I was doing the top 10 list, I did three different Mystic Mine decks in the top 10. It was Runic Mystic Mine, it was Mystic Mine Burn, and it was Sky Striker Mystic Mine. And I said, out of those three, one of them is going to be super meta, and it's going to be the best one out of those three, because the best one out of those three are going to be the best way to run Mystic Mine. And it's clearly Runic, not Sky Striker. That's where I was wrong. But for the most part, I said Flowandrease was going to be number 4, Sprite was going to be number 3, Sky Striker was going to be number 2, Chill Element's going to be number 1. It does look like Runic Sprite is number 1. Sprite variants are number 2. Tier Elements is number 3. And then I would say like Flowandrease is number 4 right behind it. But taking a look at some of the deck profiles, I like to do fun deck profiles. There just really wasn't a lot. But we did have this Exosister deck profile. This was by Ren, putting in that work on YGO Pro deck. This is obviously the top 8 deck, Exosister deck that we were just taking a look at. This was piloted by Joseph. I don't know who that is. Usually like a last name or something. But anyway, this, like I said, was top 8. So right out the gate, 3 copies of Dimension Shifter. Right, Dimension Shifter is a pretty good card. And they did just get 2 reprints back to back. So pick those up now. We usually do I do market watches every Sunday, so really good penny stock right here. But anyway, taking a look at the rest of the deck profile, 3 copies of Exosister Martha, 3 copies of Zora, Magistus Flame, 3 copies of Exosister Elise, 1 copy of Exosister Irene, 3 copies of Exosister Stella, 2 copies of Exosister Sophia. Right, so just a small-ish Exosister package. I mean, we're also running the Spells and Traps, but also 3 copies of Ash Blossom on top of our 3 Dimension Shifter, 2 Dark Luminamores, 2 evenly in the main, pretty crispy, right? We're also running 1 copy of Exosister Carpe Divum. This is a really fantastic card, but the main cards you actually have to watch out for are obviously like Exosister Pax, Exosister Returnia, Exosister Vadis, right? So, just the main thing with this deck, while Exosister does do things during its own turn, what Exosister is really trying to do is interact during your turn. So just be on the lookout for that. It could be a very like not intimidating looking board, and then all of a sudden you just can't do anything, right? So that's kind of the main thing with Exosister. Rounding out the deck profile, 3 copies of Pot of Prosperity, 1 copy of Call by the Grave because it's Called by the Grave, and 3 Infinite Permanents, like I said. So 9 hand traps, 4 hard going second cards. It's pretty solid. It's pretty solid. You're not going to win every die roll. I really, really like this list, and this is definitely a deck that you need to be looking out for. As far as budget, 5 to 10, it's not too bad. Prosperities are pretty expensive. I don't really know if you can get away with running Extravagance instead. You might, depending on how you build it, though, be able to get away with running Desires, though. And both those are a lot more budget than Prosperity. But Prosperity's not as, yeah, it's $40 is kind of for Yu-Gi-Oh card. And then Evenly's could be, like Regeki. I don't know. Like Evenly is a really solid card right now, especially going into Mystic Mine. Because when you're going into Mystic Mine, your opponent's got to make a decision. Like, do I keep all the other floodgates I have, or just keep Mystic Mine up? Because you just have Mystic Mine up. That's, Mystic Mine by itself isn't nearly as bad as like Mystic Mine with protection. But as far as the extra deck is concerned, 1 tier element Kikalos. There's also Gigant Sprite, Gigantic Sprite. I don't know why I said it like that. And then 1 Artemis. Artemis they can actually make. But 2, this will make sense in a second. We see the side deck. I've looked at this deck profile before. It'll all make sense in a second. I promise. 1 copy of Zeus, obviously. I wouldn't be surprised if 2 Zeus is fine, because this is an Xyz spam deck. But then we were also running 2 copies of Magnifica, 3 copies of Michaelis, 2 copies of Caspital, 1 copy of Esophiel, 1 copy of Debrine, 1 copy of Ninaru Magus' Glass Goddess, and of course 1 Gaga Cowboy, because it's an Xyz spam deck that also likes to kind of go a little slow, because it's more of a stun deck that will probably go into time, and this card is fantastic in time, because they won't change those rules, I don't think, ever. But yep, there are the 3 Ghost Reapers that you assumed were in the side deck. It's the only reason why this card and this card make sense. 1 Driver for the 3 Gammas, the 3rd Dark Ruler, the 3rd Evenly, 3 Cosmic for you-know-what, and 3 Solemn Judgment. I really like this side deck. My biggest issue with Ghost Reaper has always been the targets. Like, not only do you have to get Ghost Reaper, but you also have to get the targets for Ghost Reaper. But these are 2 pretty solid targets for Ghost Reaper, and it's not too super expensive. Like, this is overall a relatively budget deck. I know, like I said, it said 510. I'm not sure if I don't. Okay, so some of the Exorcist cards are a little bit up there. Maybe that's just what it is. Maybe if you want to run a budget deck, $510 is where you gotta go if you want to get top 8. But the next deck we're gonna talk about, this is actually a top 32 deck. It is Trickstar Runic Sprite, so it's probably gonna look really similar to the last deck we were talking about, which is the one that won the event. This article is also done by Renren, so shout out to Renren putting in that work. This was by Nicholas Frey. Like I said, it was in the top 32. 41 card main deck, so just off. You hate to see it. Just find 1 card to cut. You know what I mean? There's no way 41 is more optimal than 40. Like 42, like after like 42, 43, like I understand the reasoning, right? So either add more or cut some. That's where I'm at. But 1 copy of Trickstar Candina, 1 copy of Trickstar Lilybell. I always say Canadia because of the Paleozoic cards, so I just wanted to make sure I said it right. Because I get them confused because of their names. But 2 copies of Sprite Jet, 1 copy of Red, 3 copies of Blue, 1 copy of Carrot, 1 copy of Sprite Pixies. Interesting. 1 copy of Cap Shell. Shout out to Cap Shell. This has been featured on the Market Watch for multiple times. Being able to draw is pretty cool. 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird. Because you know why. And it's also just a fantastic card. Runic kind of gets hurt by it a pretty good amount. So does Sprite. I think Tier Elements might a little bit too, but not as much. But 3 copies of Sprite Starter, 3 copies of Freezing Chains, 3 copies of Tip, Double Slumber, 3 Flashing Fires, 2 Smashers, which is kind of fun, 3 Destruction, 1 Fountain, which is interesting with 3 Light Stage. I just say it's interesting because it feels like that's kind of like one of the bad things about this deck is that both of these field spells are fantastic. But I will say, in terms of Trickstar Light Stage, like it is solid, but I feel like you'd rather have Fountain up. But at the same time, they're running 3 Light Stage. I'm not sure why. Well, I know why, because you can, the first effect, right? So the first effect is you add a Trickstar card, which is super fantastic, right? But it's also a little, because it's just monsters, right? Yeah. So it's a little weird to have 3 searches of 2 monsters, but you just want to see, Lilybell and Candina as early and often as possible, right? But nonetheless, 3 copies of Impermanence and 1 copy of Reincarnation, like we just talked about. For the extra deck, 1 copy of Runic Fangs. This is so funny. 1 copy of Runic Wings. 2 copies of Runic Wings. I say it's funny because it's like, if you've ever seen Star Wars, where Obi-Wan's talking to Anakin, it's like, you were the chosen one. It said you were going to destroy the Sith, not join them. It's like, and like this is the joining of the Sith. Not saying Sprite, is the Sith, but it kind of is, and like this is the synergy point. I mean, on top of the fact that they just have like fantastic like MSTs and they have like effect negators, also just the fact that like they're running a level 2 fusion monster which synergizes with Sprite. 2 copies of Gigantic Sprite, 3 copies of Sprite Elf, 1 copy of Soul Sweeper. Respect. 1 copy of Gin Buster, 1 copy of IP, 1 copy of Phoenix, 1 copy of Dark, 1 copy of Nightmare Unicorn, 1 copy of the Unchained Abomination. This seems to be the main card that people go for with IP instead of Apollousa. which makes sense. This is a good game ender. Apollosa really isn't. Um, Granted, access code is too, but it's just like I said, this is just the card that people seem to be going for. A lot. I'm seeing a lot more IPs for Unchained Abominations than anything else. Especially in this deck, you can't really do sprite things and make like an access code in the same turn. For the side deck, one copy of Red Resonator. Because it's got Witness Guard special summon. You can target one face-up monster on the field, gain life points equal to its attack. That's funny. One copy of Pankratops, 3 copies of the Space Rock, 3 copies of Dimension Shifter, because we can run that, especially in this version of the deck, because Trickstars can also get away with... Trickstars don't really care about their graveyard. Like, Trickstars can also get away with running D-Shifter. 1 copy of Sprite Gamma Burst. So we're doing the... because this is the second card that I don't usually see in the Sprite list, because it was this one, Pixies, as well as this one. And they both are attack gain. Interesting. Because there are a lot of sprite cards that aren't like 1400 and 1600 aren't that big. Obviously, this card's attack can get pretty big, but nonetheless. 3 copies of Cosmic Cyclone. Cosmic Cyclone does seem to be the out. Like this is the second list, and we're probably going to see it on the main person who won's list. This just seems to be the best form of removal for Mystic Mind. It plays around a lot of things too, though. Like, if a Mystic Mind can't be destroyed, Cosmic Cyclone can still banish it, right? It's kind of like that. Also, there are a lot of ways to get cards from the graveyard back to your hand. It's a little bit harder to get cards from Banish Zone back to your hand. And then 3 Evenly, like I said, looking to be one of the better going second cards in the game. But this was the first place deck profile. This article is also by Ren. This was your winner, Sprite Runic. It was piloted by Joshua Schmidt. I think this is also on Lithium 2300's channel. I know he had second place. I don't know if he had first. But yeah, look at this bad boy. All right, so 40 card main deck. Gotta love to see it. 3 copies of Lava Golem. 3 copies of no comment about Lava Golem. Cards this old shouldn't be... In a game that is as power crept as Yu-Gi-Oh! Has become, cards this old being played is probably a problem. There's probably something wrong with that, but... 3 copies of Sprite Jet. If you can run Lava Golem, absolutely no reason not to. If you don't need your... Like, if you can get an extra normal summon, right? Or... if you can just special summon and not care about your normal summon, you should be running Lava Golem. It's an absolutely fantastic form of removal. 3 copies of Sprite Jet, 1 red, 3 copies of Sprite Blue, 1 Carrot, double Hyperia. Drawing cards are cool. 1 Cap Shell, 1 copy of Wind Up Kitten. I'm talking about Monster Turn. That's funny. 3 copies of Sprite Starter, double Fountain, 1 Smashers, 3 copies of Runic Freezing Chains, 3 copies of Runic Tip, 3 copies of Runic Slumber, 2 Triple Tactics Talent, 3 copies of Runic Flashing Fire, 3 copies of Runic Destruction, 1 copy of Runic Dispelling, 1 copy of Runic Smiting Storm. So no Mystic Mind in the main deck. That's cool. I respect that. I mean, like, it's still a stun deck, obviously, but that's cool. So, you know, maybe I was wrong about Runic Mystic Mind being the best way to run Runic. Like I said, this is clearly, like I was talking about earlier, like this isn't a Sprite deck as much as it is a Runic deck. I mean, there are 3, 6, 9, 11, 14 Sprite, 15 Sprite cards. But then there's also 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 Runic cards. So it's pretty even, kind of there, right? You're running these cards to help support our Sprite engine, less to help support our Runic engine. So, Runic Sprite, best deck of the format. For the extra deck, pretty self-explanatory. 1 Runic Veins, 3 Runic Wings, 1 copy of number 29. Attachment target with special summon. Okay. Not bad. 1 copy of Soul Sweeper, 1 copy of Gym Buster, 2 Gigantic Sprite, 2 Elf, 1 Dark, 1 IP, 1 Nightmare Unicorn, and then this is also a target that seems to be getting used a lot for IP Masquerena. It is an absolutely fantastic card too, though, so that helps. For the side deck, um, Eradicator Epidemic Virus. 1 second. Give me a second. 2,500 attack or more. Is that? Oh, because why not? Okie dokie. Which is this do again? Neither player can special summon monsters with 1,800 or more attack. Testudo Urat Newman. Respect. It's not a level 2 monster. It's just out there doing its thing. 1 copy of Thunder King Ryo. Hey, there we go. 1 copy of Chaos Hunter. It's a very underrated card. This is actually a solid card. Like no, I mean, so is Thunder King Ryo. I don't know about this guy, but so is Thunder King Ryo. These two are really old fashioned side deck cards, and so is this. This also saw a lot of play a long time ago. 1 copy of Red Resonator for reasons already explained. Winged Dragon of Raw Sphere mode, because if we can run Lava Golem, we can run that card. The 3rd Triple Tactics Talent. 3 copies of Forbidden Droplet. 1 Called by the Grave, because we don't know if we're going first or second, but if we're going first, we'd like to have it. And like I said already, 3 copies of Eradicator Epidemic Virus. But let me know what you guys think. What are your reactions to what happened at YCS Utrecht? Let me know in those comments down below. Make sure you guys click that like button to show your support for the channel. Subscribe for even more content. But most importantly of all, have a good day.